I really don't understand why the FBA conversation upsets people. It doesn't make any sense to me because we as Black Americans who are from the United States, all we're doing is correcting an issue with our identity. Calling us really loose terms like African American has really come back to bite us. So now we have a solution, which is okay, let's slap a name on it to distinguish the difference between us and others. I really don't understand why that's offensive. Well, anyway, I just felt the need to talk a little bit more about Byron Donalds because I wanted to really demonstrate my point that I was making in my last video. I chose the topic of reparations specifically. Now, I will say this one thing that Byron Donalds and I have in common is that we're both Republicans and we're both conservatives. But what makes us very different is the fact that he is not FBA. And he's going to prove it with his interview with the Breakfast Club.
How many people in the United States today are actually descendants of slave owners? Forget descendants of slaves. Let's hold that to the side.
Now, I know we are only a couple of seconds into his answer for what is his stance on reparations. But this whole idea of let's just hold descendants of slaves to the side is outrageous. If people who were enslaved in this country were his foreparents, he wouldn't speak so recklessly about them. When I heard him say, let's hold descendants of slaves aside, I heard two things. Thing number one, of course, let's hold me aside. Now, I'm just going to go with this first point. It's very disrespectful to be talking to a person and to tell a person, hey, as I make my point, let's just take you out of the equation. That's very passive aggressive. And I have to say this also. In FBA culture, when you talk to people like that, it's disrespectful. Now, he's Jamaican and Panamanian. That might be normal where he's from, but that's passive aggressive where I'm from. The second part of this, when you say let's hold descendants of slaves aside, the first thing I thought about was my grandfather, who was a sharecropper, my grandmother, who was actually born on a plantation and registered as property, my great grandmother. Now, a lot of people, when they talk about slavery, they say, oh, that happened such a long time ago. No, it didn't. The fact that my mother's father has been working on a plantation ever since he was 2 years old as a sharecropper, that's not that long ago. The fact that my mother grew up in that same area where people used to own my great grandmother, that's not that long ago. The fact that I could still visit family who still live either on or near the plantations that used to own them, that's not that long ago. People talk about slavery like it's this ancient Mesopotamian history. It's not. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let him finish his point.
Descendants of slave owners. You've had massive immigration into the United States over the last 150 years. So now you're going to say that people who immigrated to the United States, who are not descendants of slave owners, were not descendants of that trade, now they're going to be responsible for paying that out going forward. My mother's Jamaican. My father's Panamanian. You have a lot of black people in this country who are not descendants of the American slave trade. So I already know off top, there's a lot of black people in America who aren't going to be able to get that kind of benefit or get reparation.
So now he goes on to talk about the descendants of slave owners. And he just kind of skates past that a little bit. And it's really sly, tricky, and underhanded. And again, in FBA culture, being underhanded is offensive. Being slick with your words, that's offensive. But again, he's not from here, so he does things differently. He's really talking about two different groups while omitting another. So let's just talk about the group that he is talking about. Specifically, he's talking about immigrants, and he's explaining how There are black people here who are not FBA, and reparations will directly affect them. Fair enough. And he also feels as though, why would they have to pay into something that they never benefited from? Now, even as a person who is Republican like him, I strongly disagree with that logic. My attitude about this is if you come to the United States and you become a citizen here, you have to deal with everything that this country has to deal with. We as Americans, we send our tax dollars to foreign countries all the time. We fund things that we don't agree with all the time. But here's the difference between those other things in those foreign countries. Foundational Black Americans have had to suffer for centuries in order for this country to be a superpower. There's no argument to that. There's no debating that. This country was built on the backs of FBA slaves. So, for me, it just doesn't make sense that this country that could pay reparations to other groups that did not fuel its existence, but the very people who are still suffering today are just pushed aside. To wrap up what he was saying about the immigrant group, my short answer to this is that's the price of you coming here. This country didn't just fall out the sky. So, this country that immigrants get to come over here, and even black immigrants get to come over here and seek refuge and have a better life, yeah, you're going to have to pitch in for that. No more free rides. The other group that's not so obvious that he kind of omitted and skated by, and I really hate that Charlemagne didn't pull him back. When he says, let's talk about descendants of slave owners, he kind of implies that he's going to talk directly about those who have benefited directly from people who've owned slaves. But then he pivots at the last second, and he knows exactly what he's doing.
Well, most people who are for reparations, they feel like it should go to what they call foundational Black Americans anyway.
And I agree with that point. I agree with that point. But I'm just saying, I'm just laying out. These are the reasons for why I'm no, or why I'm no, or why I'm no.
He said, "This is the reason for why I'm no." Nobody talks like that who speaks English. Now, I'm not getting on the fact that English might be his second language. I'm still talking about the point of underhanded speech. It's disrespectful to not speak directly to a situation, to have to coax it out of you. Just say, I don't support it. All the rambling, all the trying to explain your point, it's not necessary. And what really gets me is how pitiful he looks while he's talking. And it's so crazy because he tries to garner sympathy while being underhanded. And that is so far removed from FBA culture. I don't know what culture that is, but it ain't none of mine.